In the Middle Ages, education was not designed for everyone. It was not a system meant to lift people upward. It was a system meant to preserve order. Learning followed strict boundaries defined by class, religion, and gender. Most people were born into lives where education never existed. For them, knowledge was practical, learned through repetition, work, and imitation. Formal education belonged to a different world. That world was controlled almost entirely by the church. Monasteries and cathedral schools were the heart of medieval learning. Here, education was not about curiosity. It was about discipline, silence, obedience. Students learned to read Latin, not their native language. Latin was the language of God, law, and authority. To learn Latin was to enter the intellectual elite. Books were rare and precious. Most students learned by listening. Texts were read aloud. Memorization mattered more than understanding. Questioning was limited. Knowledge flowed in one direction, from teacher to student, from scripture to mind. Education began early for those chosen. Boys selected for religious life entered monasteries as children. Their days were structured by prayer, labor, and study. Learning followed strict routines. Mistakes were punished. Discipline shaped both mind and body. Outside monasteries, cathedral schools educated future clerics and administrators. These schools trained scribes, priests, and officials. Writing, reading, basic arithmetic, and religious instruction formed the core. Advanced learning was rare. Logic, rhetoric, and philosophy were reserved for a small elite. Most nobles did not attend schools. Many powerful lords could not read. They ruled through force, tradition, and advisors. Education was not required for authority, but it could strengthen it. Kings and high nobles sometimes hired private tutors. Their education focused on governance, religion, and diplomacy. Literacy was valued, but not universal. Queens and noblewomen were educated selectively. Some learned to read and write. Others learned only prayers and household management. Education for women was often informal. Its purpose was not independence. It was usefulness. For peasants, education did not exist at all. Children worked from an early age. Survival left no time for learning letters. Schools were distant. Books were unreachable. Even curiosity had no outlet. Knowledge was passed orally. Skills were inherited through labor, not study. Towns introduced limited change. As trade grew, some urban schools appeared. Merchants needed record-keeping. Numbers mattered. Basic literacy became practical. Still, this education was narrow and functional. It did not challenge social hierarchy. The idea that everyone should learn did not exist. Education reinforced structure. It defined who could speak, write, and decide. Those who learned gained access to power. Those who did not remained dependent. Learning was permission, not a right, and permission was granted carefully. Universities emerged slowly in the later Middle Ages, but they were never places of open learning. They were exclusive institutions, accessible only to a small fraction of society. Most students were male, young, and already connected to the church. Admission required literacy, money, and permission. Without these, entry was impossible. Universities were built around authority, not innovation. Students studied approved texts. Ancient authors, church fathers, and legal codes formed the foundation. Original thought was risky. Disagreement could be punished. Debate existed, but only within narrow boundaries. Learning followed rigid structure. Lectures were spoken, students copied by hand. Books remained rare and costly. Memorization dominated. Understanding mattered less than accuracy. Examinations were oral. Failure carried consequences.
Discipline was strict. Punishments were common. Public humiliation reinforced obedience. Education shaped behavior as much as intellect. Subjects were limited. Theology stood above all else. Law trained administrators and judges. Medicine existed, but was based on ancient theory rather than experiment. Practical knowledge was secondary. Observation was discouraged. Tradition was protected. Women were excluded almost entirely. Universities were male spaces. Even noble women with education could not attend. Their learning remained private and informal. Peasants and laborers were completely excluded. Their lives offered no path toward education. The cost of study alone prevented access. Time away from work was impossible. Education demanded leisure. Leisure belonged only to the privileged. Illiteracy was not accidental. It was maintained. Teaching everyone would have disrupted hierarchy. An educated population questioned authority. The medieval world did not encourage questions. Education reinforced obedience. Even within schools, curiosity was controlled. Teachers held power. Students submitted. Learning obedience mattered as much as learning words. Those who completed education became clerics, lawyers, scribes, or officials. They entered positions of influence. They interpreted law, recorded history, and controlled information. Their education separated them permanently from the illiterate majority. The voices of the uneducated remained unheard. Their knowledge was practical, oral, and temporary. Education preserved inequality. It defined who could speak for society and who could not. Most people lived and died without reading a single line of text. They experienced the world through spoken words and memory. Their lives were shaped by rules they could not read, by prayers they could not understand, by laws they could not interpret. Education in the Middle Ages was not about enlightenment. It was about control. It decided who had access to power and who remained subject to it. Learning was guarded carefully. Those allowed to study became gatekeepers of knowledge. Those excluded remained dependent. The system endured for centuries because it worked. It maintained order. It preserved authority, and it ensured that knowledge remained rare. In the medieval world, education did not promise opportunity. It reinforced fate. Who you were born as determined what you could learn, and for most people, education was never part of life at all.